an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Magicians, Season 2, Episode 12, Ramifications. In this episode, get it? Ramifications? Because he's got ram horns. You see what they did there? This episode, y'all. Every time we take a step forward, we take a step back. I can't decide what I think. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. First of all, thank you very much to Nicole for commissioning this episode. Nicole is steady on the Magicians eps, and I appreciate it. Y'all, this episode was full of, decisions that I didn't really understand. I'm sure that you all know which one I didn't understand the most. And because they keep throwing different variables out, it's uncertain when I decide how I feel about certain things, whether or not they mean me to feel one way or another, whether or not they are taking into account some of the same variables that I am, or if they are just sort of letting go of certain things because it's not very convenient for them to write things that way, taking that into account. There is just, I don't know. I just don't know what to think, really. That's what it comes down to. There are times where I feel like I can clearly see what writers are trying to do and the direction that they're heading in and what they are trying to say about a character. And I don't have that kind of confidence when I'm assessing the characters on this show. So, all right, let's start off, and I'll talk about each of these, probably individually, since most of these storylines don't seem to intersect all that much. And we will start off talking about Alice and bringing her back to life. So, I said last episode that I am not really here for the Alice coming back storyline. And I feel like this episode and her coming back and her feelings on it sort of cement my feelings on it, because really a lot of my problem is it feels mostly like Alice coming back is all about Quentin. It doesn't even feel like it's about her. And I think that's what's getting to me about the storyline, is that I feel like this is him working out some shit and not actually caring what she wants at all. And that's essentially what she says to him when this winds up working and she is back in her body. She is super pissed at him and does not appreciate the fact that he took it upon himself to force her back into being a person when that is not something that she wanted, and she is not grateful. It's not like she only wanted to be a Niffin or was only okay with being a Niffin because she no longer had her shade and was incapable of making sound, rational decisions about what she wanted. She gets her shade put back and she still is pissed and doesn't want to be here anymore. She's still... So the fact that it feels like so much of Alice coming back is about Quentin really matches up with the vibe overall that I've been getting about her storyline and Julia's storyline regarding the fact that they each have their agency taken away in a way that's really fucked up to watch over and over again for the same characters. And I really want to underline the difference between something bad happens to you and your agency is taken away. That isn't exactly that they are not the same thing. So, like, bad things happen to all the characters in this show. Like, that's how the show works. That's how the plot moves forward. It's like yet another terrible thing happens. But for Alice and Julia specifically, their consent keeps being violated repeatedly in ways that feel really ugly to me. And plenty of characters are put into tough situations where they have to make fucked up choices. That, again, is still a choice. That's not the same thing. You know, Eliot deciding that he is going to marry and stay in Fillory as High King. He chooses to do that, even though it sucks. He could have not done it. He's given an option. It doesn't feel like that with Alice or with Julia. That finally, the only like choice that she has gotten to make in ages is deciding to leave her shade behind. And it really bums me out that she's finally given an option to do something for herself. She's given a real choice for the first time in ages. And she chooses to give up her well-being for the sake of Quentin, who is doing something against the will of the person he is allegedly trying to help. Ashley's saying he didn't know that, though her shade seemed to think that she wanted to be human again, or that she would want to be human again. I mean, I guess, but again, I don't buy that Quentin cares what her shade thinks. I think Quentin wants her back, and he would do what he felt like doing. Like, I don't really think that there is anything in the script that convinces me and anything mattered in his decision here other than what he wanted. It feels 100% about him. So I'm just getting really frustrated with the circles that we're doing regarding Alice and Julia, both being probably the female characters in the show that are closest to Quentin, and both of them getting fucking shafted in terms of having any sort of say in their own plot lines and what they're doing. It's just really getting old. And Alice coming back and being super angry at Quentin, I feel like now we're going to be in this thing where it's like he's trying to get her to forgive him. And I am so fucking tired of him and her. I really fucking am. Like, I just need him to focus on himself here and leave her to get through the major traumas that she just endured because he deemed it should be so, in her own way, on her own time, and leave her the fuck alone. But he can't help but put himself in her face and, like, you know, explain himself and demand that she make room for him. Dude, it's not about you, and I am really, really tired of you as a person on this show. Like, Quentin just, there has been moments where, in this episode, for instance, there are 2 different times where he yells at people to, like, make things right. And I appreciated him in those moments of just being like, yeah, we need somebody to fucking really, like, hammer it home to these people that they have a responsibility here and should be concerned about what happens because of their own conscience, not just because they have a vested interest in how things turn out. But it feels kind of hollow when he is lecturing other people on this stuff. And I don't feel like he is being honest with himself about his motivations and about what has happened. You know, he's sort of treating this like, well, I got Alice killed, and so bringing her back to life and making her a human again is me putting that right. But that's just him centering himself yet again, because Alice chose to do magic that she couldn't quite handle in order to get rid of the beast. That was a choice that she decided to make. And him wanting her back enough to, like, you know, force the issue, he doesn't have any right. And he's only acting as if it's his fault to give himself a back door that he can use to justify the fact that he is so hung up on getting her back. That's how I feel about it. And y'all can feel free to disagree with me, but, like, I have reached the end of my patience with him and with the way the show keeps treating these two characters. And I'm just, like, starting to get super mad every time they're on screen. So I want y'all to know where I'm at here. Like, it's just, if I seem to be being harder than it seems like maybe I should be on certain characters or on certain storylines going forward, you have to know that that is coming from a place of me being overall really frustrated with some specific things that they're doing. And so I won't be watching certain plot lines with goodwill. I'm not going to be coming at it from, like, a place of open-mindedness, because they've sort of shut that down for me. And I am really bummed out because I thought that they were going to commit to Alice having sacrificed herself and done something really noble and badass and selfless. And then they just fucking had to take that away from her in this way that feels really gross. So anyway, so yeah, we have this whole opening thing that when we are talking to Professor Mayakovsky, and he is acting like he doesn't want anything to do with this whole plan, that this is ridiculous, it can't be done, you don't know what you're talking about. And they are starting to walk away and say that they're going to go talk to Dean Fogg. And Julia, she's the one that's really here, like, starting to get irritated with him. And he says something like, oh, sure, go to Dean Fogg, but I fart more magic than he uses. Like, he's just talking shit, but also doesn't want to help. And it's just like, well, then keep your fucking mouth shut, dude. So he says something like the energy we would need would take 100 master magicians. And Julia sort of, like, looks up askance behind him, and there is a huge floating silver sphere that apparently is recognizable to her as a battery. I don't know exactly how. I'm guessing, like, the symbol that's on it is something that she knows. But yeah, I'm sorry, Alex just said, definitely seems like human Alice might not want to be a Niffin, but Niffin Alice was quite happy as a Niffin. Yeah, I don't know, when she comes back to herself, we'll get there, but it seems like she wants to go back, like she's not glad that he did this. But yeah, so she has to convince him to give up this battery to use to bring Alice back, because basically what they have to do is summon her, which like, that's a huge use of magical energy, and then, like, somehow force the two of them together. And again, he keeps on arguing with the two of them about not doing this, and Quentin finally yells at him about how Alice went to Breakbills specifically to find out what happened to her brother, and the reason that she had to do that in the first place was because of a student who fell in love with him doing something, because she had this hopeless, like, infatuation with him that is his responsibility, because he was the fucking professor. He should not have been engaging with her at all. So he ultimately was the one that is, like, indirectly responsible for everything that happened to Alice's brother and then to Alice. And he's sort of trying, like, you can see on his face that he wants to argue, but he doesn't really have a leg to stand on here. So he finally agrees to participate in this thing. And it's pretty dope looking. Like, the setup for it is cool. They have each of these batteries that are on, like, a little stand on the floor. There's a circle painted on the floor, and then this, like, cage in the center that has all of these, like, symbols in metal. And, like, the cage, it's not like you couldn't slide out of that cage. The cage is clearly, like, meant to contain energy. It's not necessarily the bars that keep whatever's inside in there. So at this point, what is it that, because he says she's going to be really pissed at me. And Julia says, yeah, but when she has her shade back, she'll get it. Trust me. And I'm like, girl, you don't know that. Like, you want your shade back. But what are you doing? You know, like, I just wish so much that the Julia who has had her own agency sort of overridden several times would be a little bit more sensitive to the fact that being like, I'm doing this for your own good, you'll thank me later, is not really the way that you want to start moving through your life after experiencing that yourself. So she says, speaking of shades, since this is probably the last time that I'm going to have one, I want to tell you you're a good friend, a better one than I deserve. And of course they are interrupted by Mayakovsky, who is just like, all right, so let's do this then. And it turns out that Quentin has to like reach into her chest and pull the shade out, which is pretty horrible to watch. And when they summon Alice, she's looking around, obviously like flipped out because she seems to immediately know why the fuck she's here. And she is not excited about it at all. And yeah, the poor little shade Alice, she just seems so small and so delicate to be like in that cage with crazy bananas Niffin Alice that I'm just like, oh my God, this is really dangerous. But I guess that's like the duality of man, right? So yeah, Niffin Alice, when she gets summoned too, she's like this like cloud of black dust. Well, I guess that's the energy being released. It looks like it's her because the energy is released from each one because he's going around and opening them, and then she sort of appears. So I guess that's not actually her herself. She's like, but it does have a really cool effect. This energy like hovering in the air around the cage. And she looks like she's going to eat this little girl. Like she is not. Yeah. She says, I'll burn you alive for this. So yeah, Quentin starts his thing and he does his chant and she starts begging him not to do it. And he goes through with it anyway and gets sucked back, and they sort of do that like blah, 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 and get put together into one person. And it's sort of funny because for a second it looks like she's wearing a dress, like the same clothes that maybe her shade was wearing. But then once she actually solidifies, she is naked and like crouched in this like superhero landing sort of crouch. And she has an expression on her face like, you know, she does not know what she's doing here, or that it's almost like she just can't believe that he would fucking do this. So she's really like not talking. He brings her a bunch of clothes and she's in a room staring at herself in the mirror, just kind of like getting used to the fact that she's back in a body. And he asks, why don't I bring you some food? I need to start you off with bland stuff, but I was thinking like oatmeal, and she's sort of just like not really paying attention. And finally she says, why? And when he says, I couldn't leave you like that. And when he says that, she looks like somebody like held a rotting carcass under her nose. Like the look on her face, it's just she's so revolted by him phrasing it this way. And just turns around finally and says, fuck you. And I was like, you know what? Yes, correct, Alice. I am with you on this. So we go to, from here. Well, actually, I was going to go to Penny because he's like dealing with this whole thing. Penny's, I'm going to just kind of do Penny real quick since I just brought him up. Penny is with this chick whose name I cannot remember, but it doesn't matter because she winds up dead by the end of this episode anyway. This girl is like wanting to help him get into the poison room, and they find out that there's a way to get into it via one of the fountains. And because he's a traveler, he's able to track down a fountain really quickly because she thinks it's going to take months. And he has to unlock it. But like, guys, is it just me, or is that fountain really fucking easy to unlock? That seems way too simple. I don't know if she herself was supposed to have more power than we could see, if there's something about her that's special and sets her apart. But she was really able to just Alohomora that shit open. And they get in there, and what it looks like is basically that the poison room is like radioactive, basically. There is a reason it is called what it is called. And he finds the information that he needs about killing a god, but they spent a little too much time in there, and this girl is infected with whatever sort of illness is in the air and does not make it out. And it turns out when they went down there, she knew she wasn't going to make it out, and she was willing to do it anyway, which I am very, very curious about. So yeah, and she says something about when Penny is like asking her why she wants to get in there in the first place. She keeps talking about how all of the books of people that are around now that she has read, because you're not supposed to, but you can, they all end with like 20 blank pages, and she can't figure it out. She doesn't know what that means. So she's like trying to get more information about what could be going on there with these blank pages. And obviously that's super mysterious and creepy. So it makes sense that Penny is sort of like, okay, now that you've said that, yeah, I also would definitely like to know. And he comes back with this information, and it's sort of awful at this point because I'm like, you know that as a viewer that the God killing thing that they needed to do is sort of over and done with. And it's really not. I assume that we're going to have to deal with killing Ember, but we'll get there. At this point, it feels over and done with, and that he made a terrible sacrifice of his health yet again for something that might not actually matter. So yeah, the whole thing is interesting. And like the poison room, I think being actual poison, I like to think that it's more like the energy in the books is so toxic and such like full of such bad juju that it infects the entire room with this bad energy, which acts almost as if it is radioactive. I don't have anything to support that, but I really enjoy the idea that it's like being around them is even dangerous, you know, that it's more than just reading them and acting on them, that it's like its own toxic thing in the midst of everything. So yeah, this is just it's a weird subplot. I don't know really what's going on there, but hopefully it will pay off somehow. So, okay, that's pretty much everything with Penny. I'm trying to see what else is going on with Quentin, but he winds up getting sort of intertwined with what's happening with Eliot, because Eliot has been kicked out of Fillory. And he really believes that Quentin still has the button and he can just duck back in. But it turns out that Quentin traded it away. And he starts to demand, like, what the fuck did you trade it for? And then he sees Alice walk by, and he just gets this look and is like, oh, okay, now it all makes sense again. And yeah, I really, really enjoyed his acting in that moment of just him. It's this combination of like total startlement and, of course you did. So we can go back to Josh, who, because Eliot is gone, Josh is made High King by default because there is just nobody else here. And I really have to say, I feel so sorry for the people of Fillory. Ember and Umber, when we find out that, like, that Umber is kind of, like, staying away and just letting Fillory collapse in on itself, it feels like they can't have implemented this kings and queens of Fillory have to be children of Earth without knowing it was going to result in this kind of chaos, right? Like, this is so frustrating for these poor Fillorians that it's just a bunch of fucking asshole Earthlings who don't know anything about their customs, anything about what this world is like, and they have to educate them on everything. But these are the people that are, like, allegedly in charge. I would be fucking furious. So he is about to just, like, sit on that throne immediately, and they have to stop him and be like, dude, no, they're cursed. Oh my God. And we wind up seeing a little bit later, I think that he, like, replaces them with his own throne that is much more, like, comfortable to sit on, which I just really would like to know why they didn't all just do that in the first place. Why did we keep those thrones? Are they just, like, cemented to the floor? If you try to burn them, do they not burn? I just would have liked to see some effort put into doing that to guarantee to me that they are not possible to be moved. And Josh says Hakuna Matata is his, like, philosophy. Bring in the talking rats and translate for the rat people. Erase the mountains that are gone. We're giving all those beavers braces because they deserve it. And it's really, like, amazing, this whole laissez-faire sort of attitude that he is taking on. And we wind up seeing later that he is planning to basically get stoned every day, get all of his people high every day, at least his court, and just kind of, like, handle shit as it comes at him, which isn't any worse than the other methods I have seen of how people have handled being kings and queens of Fillory, so I can't even be mad at him, to be honest. He does, we see them get moved. Yeah. Okay, he apparently just touching the cursed thrones isn't enough because he is able to, like, knock them all down. Why wasn't that the first thing you did, you guys? I don't get you. But yeah, thank you, Josh, for having some fucking sense. I love seeing everybody, like, getting really stoned and coming up to him with, like, different decrees for him to sign as this, like, fucking rap song is playing, and it is just a good time. You need this here and there. This sort of reminds me of, like, the what do you call it, disco ball bomb that Eliot uses during the heist episode, in that it's just, like, a nice moment of everybody getting to completely cut loose in this weird way. So yeah, he's sitting there, like, on his throne with a giant bong next to him while everybody else is eating grapes and roasting a pig and just sort of relaxing and chilling out. And I was like, you know, that looks nice and fun and everything, but also, like, what's going on with all of the other people, the rat people? Because you said you wanted to get some translators out here, and I would like to talk to them because I thought maybe they might know what's happening. We wind up finding out later that it's Ember who did it, probably just for funsies, which fucked up, Ember. Know me likey. Huggabug says the girl going into the poison room didn't know she wouldn't make it out. She only finds that out after she gets in there and reads it in her book. Ah, thank you, Huggabug. I thought that she had read her book earlier. I didn't realize it was her own book that was in there. I missed that. So Julia comes into the physical kids, like, dorm house, and Kady is there, and obviously still really pissed at Julia for trying to essentially sacrifice Quentin in order to kill Reynard. And she begs Kady for forgiveness and is like, look, I don't have my shade, but that doesn't, like, mean that it's a total excuse to be an asshole and be like the beast. So I want to try to be better. Will you help me be better? And I promise to trust you when you tell me to, like, rein it in. And it's so annoying because Kady agrees to this, and then Julia pretty much like betrays that entirely. And whether you agree with what Julia did or not, you can't blame Kady for reacting the way that she does. So finally, we have the chat between the senator and Kady and Julia, because he came to speak to them after having this like run-in with his dad, I believe last episode. And when she asks, does Reynard know you're here? He says no. And I mean, guys, is there anybody who really believes that he doesn't know everything that's going on all the time? Like, y'all don't really have much protection over yourselves. It's like, you've got the protection of Breakbills in general, but he knows where Breakbills is. So if the senator wanders off towards this general like acreage, it's not exactly difficult to piece together where the fuck he's going. And so him just being like, no, he has no idea where I am. I was just like, dude, no, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, the fact that you think that you can hide things from a god is hilarious. I don't know why you think you're sneaky enough to like not get discovered by a literal trickster god. That's what he does, is trick people. And you think you can trick him? Like, get the fuck out of here. But I was like, well, maybe I'm supposed to just believe that he doesn't know. Maybe that's like my suspension of disbelief is going to be key for this plot point. Nope. Turns out I was right. Reynard totally knows. And he is ready to continue fucking John's life up. So yeah, he tells Julia about the whole thing with Our Lady Underground and that Reynard is obsessed with her. And he says, I think they were lovers, and that everything that he's doing to her followers and to you is to get back to her. It's not random. He is angry at her and he's lashing out at her people. And Julia realizes what this means. Now, I had said last episode that it felt really obvious to me that Our Lady Underground being like MIA from the underworld seemed like it was being, like she was being held captive somewhere. Apparently not. And I don't have any idea what would motivate her to abandon her home if it wasn't absolutely required. But I don't know. Maybe we'll find out, but I suspect not. So Julia is realizing that we could whip up a storm and make Reynard believe that she's there, because this is something that's like kind of in the documentation. They have a lot of books that they're reading about regarding how Persephone appears on Earth. Storms that are concentrated in a tight area are sort of a trademark of hers, and they signal that she is coming across to Earth. So they're like, all right, well, we can like fake that and make it seem like she's coming. And then it will draw him out, and then we'll be able to kill him. And understandably, John's like, all right, but where do I fit into this? And she's like, we need to teach you magic because you're literally the only one who could do it. Like, you have the energy. Neither of us has it. So we're going to need to get you on the page with us. And I appreciated that. Because, of course, Kady initially, when she's like, we're going to use you, Kady's like, excuse me. And she's like, not like that. So what happens is he goes back to his office, and Reynard is there waiting for him and totally knows where she is, or knows where he was. And he hands him a box. Poor John. He opens it, and there's an ear in there. It's pretty awful. And it turns out, because he asks Reynard, where's my wife? And Reynard says, oh, here and there. Whew. Guys, listen, tough guy villain lines often don't really land for me, because it's like very consistently over the top in a way that feels like predictable and therefore not over the top at all. This here and there response chilled my blood. That was so scary. I did not like it. And I appreciated John's reaction. And Reynard tells him, I saved you the biggest piece. And I was like, oh, God, you're so horrifying. I hate you so much. And Reynard is like, dude, you got to stop trying to be a good person. Like, you just are wasting time. You're wasting energy. Just fucking be what you are. And John says, if you think doing this is going to turn me into what you are, you don't understand people at all. To which Reynard says, I've been at it for a long time. Look at Julia. I put a tiny black spot on her soul and she scrubbed at it so much she put a hole in it. She can never go back to who she is. Guys, that's fucked up. Like, I really, the whole thing with gods, and this is something that comes up, and I know I talk about the Dresden Files a lot as well, but there are many parallels to little things that they do on this show with that. But there is a thing with the Dresden Files as well, where he's going up against some creatures called the Denarians, which are fallen angels that have been around for literal millennia. And he keeps thinking that he can like outwit them on certain things. And it's gradually becoming apparent that they know him pretty well. And they know human nature pretty well. And they're able to predict his reaction to things pretty well. And that does feel like something that you would sort of get to be a pro at if you're a god. You would just start to... People aren't that different. They might surprise you sometimes, but honestly, there's a reason why when you get older and you hear teenagers telling you about things that they're going through, it's like looking in a mirror in some ways, because we all go through a lot of really similar experiences. And oftentimes we make the same excuses for people, or we rationalize the same sorts of actions or whatever. So if you get that kind of like perspective and wisdom over just the course of, several decades, if you're a fucking god, it must be excruciating to watch people going through the same motions you've seen literally billions of times and acting like they're really unique and doing something so new and different, and just being like, come on, no, you're not. So in summary, he leaves him, and John goes back to the witches, and he is talking to Julia, and he tells her, I think that you should go and get some pizza, in this really like intense sort of way that is the signal to us that he's using mind control. And she says, okay, and leaves. And then he has to go and do the same thing to Kady. And her nose starts bleeding because she's got such strong mental wards up that he is having to break through in order to get her to do this. And he is like, I am sorry that I'm asking you to do this. Not asking, making. But I could not put Julia through that again. And we realize exactly what this is a little bit later. But yeah, I'm glad that he did not put Julia through that again. It would have been understandable for him to feel like, well, she doesn't have a shade, so maybe it will be easier for her to do this. But also, evening out the damage, I feel like I understand that impulse also. So yeah, what it turns out he wants is for Kady to kill him and harvest the energy in him from his godliness. And it is really awful when Julia comes back and, still does not know what's going on. And she just sees Kady coming down the stairs, absolutely covered in blood and shaking and really flipped out about the fact that this is like something that it's not like she was like knocked out and did it without, like, I have no doubt that she was fully aware throughout and simply unable to stop herself, which is like particularly horrible. So I don't know what she did with the body. I don't know what, all of that. Like, I'm curious about what that deal is with the logistics of this dude's death. But what Julia does is takes the energy and she puts it into a bullet using some kind of spell, which is pretty dope looking. And then they do this storm thing in order to summon Reynard, which pretty much works like a charm. It's sort of funny to me that it worked as well as it did. And he's standing there yelling that, like, I know you're here, the whole thing. He really does have his guard down entirely. And Kady decides to go out there and distract him while Julia comes around the other side to shoot him. And, like, part of me understands why she feels the need to be the distractor, because he already, like, fucked Julia up, that putting her in the position to be bait feels sort of unfair. But considering that Julia was the one who hesitated on fucking stabbing him last time, were I Kady, would not trust her to do this. And as it turns out, I would be right not to trust her. Because fucking, she comes out and she's like, instead of asking where Julia is, why don't you ask me where John was? Or where John is? He hated you so much, he begged me to kill him. And he starts to yell that she's a liar. And Julia cocks the gun and he turns around. Guys, what? I hate this shit. I hate it. I hate it with a fucking passion. Cock the gun before you come out. There's a lot of noise. He will not hear it. And you shoot him in the back. There is absolutely no reason to draw this shit out this way. I fucking hate this scene. I hate it so much. And all of a sudden, the wind dies, and they all sort of freeze except for Julia. Now, this dude's a god. You trying to tell me that she's standing there with this gun raised against him, and he couldn't instantly have, like, tossed her 60 feet? It feels like they're very inconsistent on what they want their gods to be able to do in this show. He was able to shoot through 4 people and rip each of their hearts out, or cut their throats, or whatever it was he did, in, like, less than 8 seconds. But here she's standing there with the gun raised like a fucking dope for probably a good 10 seconds before everything gets frozen. It made me so angry. So all of this dies down, and then all of a sudden Persephone appears. Persephone, Our Lady Underground, whatever. She is looking like the woman that we saw Julia have an encounter with. So he apparently imitated her appearance as well when he was tricking her. And it becomes clear that Kady cannot move, and neither can Reynard. But they can move their eyes. And Julia still has the gun raised, but it like she's able to talk. So I guess she's not frozen the same way. And she says, "You're here all of a sudden? Why?" And Persephone says to ask you to spare his life. And she says, "I don't understand. Why do you care?" And she says, "Because he's my son." And the two of them, her and Kady, are just like, "Wait, what? And did you know what he was doing?" And Persephone just kind of like looks down and she says, "Oh, yeah, of course you did. He raped me. I'd be sobbing and telling you every detail, but I lost my shade in the abortion, so you're just going to have to take my word for it." And Persephone says, "Let me deal with him." And Julia very rightfully says, "Why would I trust you to do that?" To which she replies, "There are consequences to killing a god, Julia." And she says, "I lost my friends. I lost everything. He turned me into a monster." And Persephone says, "You're a survivor." Basically, like, you don't need to be a monster. He can't turn you into something. You're still making choices. You could show him mercy. You're still capable of doing that. And she finally, like, steps away from him and lets Persephone, like, there's this moment where Persephone is like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And he just starts, like, saying, "You left me. You left me." And she says, "I am so disappointed with what you've done." And she puts her hand on his shoulder and the two of them just disappear. And Kady starts screaming, "How could you do this after everything we've been through?" And Julia says, "It was the right thing to do." And Kady says, "I killed John for this. How the hell do you know it's the right thing to do?" And Julia doesn't answer her. She just says, "I'm sorry, Kady." And Kady stalks away. Julia does not have the gun anymore. Now, I want to point this out because this is something that kind of bothered me. Like, she has the gun in her hand right up to the point, I think, that Persephone puts her hand on his shoulder and says, "It's time to go." Unless she dropped it, but I don't think so. So what I had been thinking was that it would be great if they kept that gun and that bullet to kill Ember. Because that's what I feel like needs to happen in order to save Fillory, since Ember just feels like being an asshole for the fun of it because he's bored. I don't know that that's an option, though, because it looks like the gun's gone. So, I don't know. Hugabug says maybe Reynard assumes it's a regular gun and won't hurt him even if she does shoot. I mean, maybe. It's just, you know, her just not deciding to just take her shot immediately doesn't make sense to me. So, yeah, I'm super duper frustrated with this turn of events. I understand there are consequences to killing a god, but honestly, the idea that this woman being this goddess, saw what he was doing and the harm that he was wreaking and did absolutely nothing to fucking stop him, and then showed up and tries to be merciful. Honestly, I would shoot her. I would be so over it. Like, how dare you? Straight up, how fucking dare you show up and try and tell her how to take the high ground when you have done absolutely fuck all? Like, all I can think is that she really is being kept somewhere against her will and was only allowed free to go grab Reynard and keep him from being killed. Because if there is literally anything else going on, I would never forgive her. And her inaction while he's out here doing what he's been doing and murdering without any sort of consequence at all. I just don't, there needs to be more to this. And even if there is, it needs to be a very specific more for this to make any sense and be at all satisfying to me. And I just wanted Kady to be the one to wield the gun at this point, because honestly, Julia not having a shade, I'm sorry, but I still don't trust her. She's been doing too much shit. And I understand that this is supposed to be a redemption to show that she can have sustained some damage but not let it ruin her. But you got to earn that. You don't just get given the gun. I don't care for it. So I understand if Kady pretty much wants nothing to do with Julia ever again. But I just oh, what a bummer. So meanwhile, Quentin and Eliot are on the search for the clock that Quentin remembers seeing when he went on his initial interview where this dude turned up dead that was supposed to do the interview. And he tracks it down. Apparently, like, it was sold to somebody who does like all of this collecting of Fillory merchandise is the wrong word, because that implies it's stuff that's out there to be sold. It's like the scripts and props and things like this from like the movie that got written and all of the stuff that they were like planning to change. It's really funny for a second when you don't know who this is yet. This guy, he is kind of bonding with him over the fact that this script was going to like completely massacre a couple of the characters and change the things that happened. The whole place. And he says something about the washerwoman being Jane. And that's what makes Quentin sort of stop and be like, wait a minute. It's never specifically said that Jane's the washerwoman. And he sort of tries to do this whole like, well, you know, it's assumed that that she is, like, there's a lot of subtext and whatnot. But Quentin is not buying it. And all of a sudden he's like, wait a second, you've been to Fillory. And this dude tries to like laugh it off and be like, oh, what do you even mean? Meanwhile, Eliot is doing some magic to sort of try and see through a glamour. And he's like, Q? He has horns. And he's like, just like Ember, just like Ember. And this dude looks at the two of them and is like, fuck, and snaps his fingers. And there he is with the horns and the whole deal. And Quentin is like, motherfucker. Seriously? Umber, are you here? Are we doing this? And Umber tells them about how like shit started to go too far left. And that he just decided that he was going to leave it because it was like with the beast, with Martin going nuts over there, it was just a matter of time until everything started to break down. And that he's decided that he's going to concentrate most of his efforts on building a new world. So he's asking Eliot and Quentin, before they know what's happening, what is it they enjoy about Fillory? And he's like taking notes when they're talking about like, there's opium in the air. Okay. And how do you feel about turtles? And Eliot says indifferent, I guess. And Quentin says not a fan. Would you sleep easier knowing that one or more of your worlds rested on the back of one or several? And they're like, what are you talking about? Because as visitors to my previous work, you make for an excellent focus group for my new world. Guys, he wants to call it Cuba because it's a cube. Can you imagine being able to just build a world? I mean, and I'm not talking about being a writer. I'm talking about like you just set that shit in motion and just walk away and it just starts to do its own thing. Like that's bonkers. But yeah, he is very, very unconcerned with Fillory's fate. And as much as he sees it, Fillory is on its own and no longer his responsibility at all. So when Eliot says, I have a kingdom to fix, he literally laughs in his face. And it's just like, you're never supposed to fix it. You were meant to entertain, like some reality TV star. Oh, Ember must have found you so boring. Fillory was created out of the unification of opposites. Ember is a creature of entropy and chaos. And and Quentin interrupts with, and you have every season of Law and Order on DVD. And he says the most perfect show in creation. When Ember and I were together, there was balance. But without me, chaos reigns. Give up, children of Earth. Fillory cannot be ruled. So this is pretty much like the worst news that you could get about like the meaning of life. Is like, no, God just like made you for something to do. And just kind of like looks down to see what y'all are getting up to and like laughs. Or is just like, weeping along with you while wiping his eyes, because that was a really moving episode, but isn't actually going to do anything. There's no involvement. There's no sincere sort of like desire to help or change anything. It's rough. Meanwhile, back in Fillory, fucking Prince S shows up and cuts the throat of like half the court, pretty much all of them that remain alive, because he is convinced that they are holding his father hostage. Evidently, he doesn't know about the rat thing, which is weird, because I thought, because of what Ember says, I thought that he was, or Umber says, I had thought that Ember transformed like half of the human beings in Fillory, period. But evidently he really focused on the castle. So Prince S does not know what's going on here. So yeah, he comes in and cuts their throats, and poor Josh has to like go running away covered in blood. Oh, Josh, you gave it your best shot, buddy. So Quentin and Eliot are trying to talk. They're trying to talk Umber into caring again and taking responsibility again. And then when he says when he gets snacky, he talks about turning humans into rats. They're all just like, motherfucker. So that's what it is, because he thinks that they'd been thinking that it was like the fairy thing, that it was that deal. So yeah, why are you letting your brother shit all over it? You let the beast happen by shutting out a child who needed shelter. And when he became a monster, you ran. You claim that you hate chaos, and then you just allow it to happen. And you're not even trying to fix the one that you created. And again, I'm here for this moment. I appreciate Quentin talking about this, but I just really wish that it wasn't him that was doing it, because I just, he makes me so angry at this point. And he says some mistakes can't be repaired, and we just have to move forward. I shall try to avoid repeating such mistakes in my new world. So Eliot sits down and he's like, fine, then give us the clock. We'll go back and we'll do what we need to do. And this isn't your responsibility, but we'll just let us do what we're going to do. And it's not up to you. It won't be your problem, essentially. And you're acting like you really don't care if we fix it, but you've got like all of these mementos dedicated to Fillory. So I have a hard time believing that you really don't care. Just give us a shot at it, and we'll try it. We'll try to do something. And he asks Eliot, do you really love Fillory? And Eliot just says, it's my home, which isn't really an answer, but like it is, but you know what I mean. And that seems to convince him. And he says, nothing entertains Ember more than a whimsical death. And he sort of sits back and smokes his pipe, and that could be taken a whole lot of ways. But we'll see exactly how they decide to utilize that little bit of advice. So at the end of the episode, Quentin goes and talks to Alice, and she's squinting, trying to read. And he says, because when he comes in, apparently he had been told to like give her some space. But he says, I'm sorry I hurt you. And he's sort of like shuffling, like he doesn't know what to say. He says, I tried to do the right thing, and I'm not sorry you're alive. Maybe that makes me selfish, but I just think that the world is a better place when you're in it. Say the word and I'll stay. And she looks up at him like she would like nothing better than to disembowel him with her bare hands. And he really seems to feel the impact of that look and says, if you want me to leave you alone for a while and figure this out on your own, I mean, let's face it, there's probably nothing that you can't figure out. You are Alice Quinn. And she doesn't answer him and just keeps staring at her book. But, you know, the whole conversation, I think she was talking to Mayakovsky earlier, and she's like telling him how she's stuck in this like disgusting, sticky body. Like her sight is going away. She needs glasses again to read. Like she had just been perfection as a Niffin, despite not having a shade. There was like a perfect clarity, and everything functioned exactly as it was supposed to. And being returned to what's basically a prison of her own body is like horrifying to her. This is a nightmare. But yeah, she doesn't respond to Quentin at all throughout this scene, and I was happy about it. So they are standing outside the clock. Him and Eliot find a way to stop Ember or drive him out, or I don't know. Anything but letting him get bored. And so that he doesn't decide to treat the kingdom like an Etch-a-Sketch and just like end the place. And Quentin says, you're talking about conquering Fillory. And Eliot says, for its own good. And he says, your plan is the exact same as the beast's was. And Eliot just says, shit. And then they like look up at the clock and he says, well, do you got a better idea? And honestly, it's not exactly the same as the beast's was. He wants to make Fillory a better place for everyone to live by dealing with this maniac god. That is not the same as I am going to divert the wellspring and use it as my own personal source of magic until the entire kingdom begins to crumble because they can no longer feed themselves. So, yeah, that's not the same plan at all. And I don't understand why he seems to accept, like Quentin saying that to him. It's not remotely the same. Not even a little bit the same. Why does he just sit back and be like, well, shit, you really called me out? No, he didn't call you out. That's not true. That was nonsense. Like, the fact that he could even say that with a straight face is insulting to Eliot, frankly. And like, I'm just so disgusted with this guy. I'm so fucking, guys. I'm just so mad. This episode just made me so mad, y'all. I don't know what to think. So, you know, we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I'm mad, and I anticipate, based on the patterns that this show follows, that I'm just going to stay mad. So I hope y'all are ready for me to just, like, stay mad. I hope you're ready for more of this, because I think this is what you're going to get. So, until next time. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast. That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.